Thank you for watching. Today, we present an American classic ghost story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Set in the early 19th century near New York, this timeless tale follows the fate of a schoolteacher and the mysterious Headless Horseman. Now, let us embark on a quiet journey through the night. Scene 1. The village of Sleepy Hollow and the beginning of the legend. On the eastern bank of the Hudson River, near the village called Tarrytown, there lies a small valley shaped like a quiet cove. Nestled in a hollow among the river hills, it seems hidden from the world, wrapped in a stillness that feels almost dreamlike. It is as though the entire valley has sunk into a gentle, unending slumber. From olden times, this place has been known as Sleepy Hollow. The people who live nearby are calm and reflective by nature, inclined toward daydreams, and easily drawn into tales of fancy. They have long accepted stories of fairies and ghosts as part of everyday life, speaking of such beings as naturally as one might speak of the weather. Especially at night, when mist gathers and silence deepens, many claim to feel something mysterious moving through the air. Among all the legends that linger in this valley, the most famous of them all is that of the dreadful Headless Horseman. He is said to have been a Hessian soldier who lost his head to a cannonball during the days of the American Revolution. Yet his spirit, unable to find rest, still rides through the valley each night, galloping in search of his lost head. Some say they have seen him deep in the woods, others, under the pale light of the moon upon the hilltops. Each time his black horse's hooves strike the ground, the earth seems to tremble, and the whole valley feels as if it awakens. But before dawn he vanishes, returning, they say, to the churchyard where he was laid to rest. The village of Sleepy Hollow itself seems bewitched by the power of this legend. Its people live with a quiet dread of the phantom, yet are strangely fascinated by him all the same. Even in daylight one might pause in the forest, listening for unseen sounds, while at night the church bell tolls with an eerie, heavy echo. In time, the tale spread far beyond the valley, and travelers came to know this as the place where the Headless Horseman rides by night. Few dared to enter after sunset, and riders who passed through hastened their pace through the dark. Those bold enough to venture out after dusk swore they heard the faint thud of hooves drifting between and the trees. Thus, through countless generations, the legend of Sleepy Hollow has been told and riddled until the very air of the valley itself seems steeped in both dream and fear. And now begins the tale of one strange night in that mysterious village, the night when a humble schoolteacher encountered the legend face to face. Scene 2. The appearance and character of Ichabod Crane. For a time, there lived in the village of Sleepy Hollow a schoolteacher named Ichabod Crane. He came from the state of Connecticut, a wandering teacher who traveled from place to place, earning his living by instructing wherever he could find pupils. He was extraordinarily tall, and exceedingly thin, so much so that his whole frame seemed made of nothing but skin and bone. His legs were long and spindly like bamboo, his arms were awkwardly long, and his hands were large and bony like a bear's paws. His head was small and narrow at the top, with large, protruding ears. His nose was long and hooked like a bird's beak, and beneath it stretched a pair of lips that wore a perpetual, sly grin. From above them shone two small, sharp gray eyes that glittered with restless energy. When he walked, from a distance, he looked like a great crow spreading its wings and gliding over the ground. His tall, gaunt figure was clothed in a faded black suit, and beneath his arm he always carried a book half-read or a bag stuffed with school materials. The village children would burst into laughter at the mere sight of him, and when he passed, they would secretly imitate his peculiar gait behind his back. Yet despite his odd appearance, Ichabod Crane was well respected and warmly regarded in the valley. Though poor, he was honest, diligent, and devoted to his work. He not only taught reading and writing to the village children, but also assisted with the reading of the Bible on Sundays. His earnings were meager, and rarely in cash. He was paid instead by small offerings from each household. A sack of corn here, a basket of vegetables or fruit there, or perhaps a pair of shoes made by a grateful father. Thus, his life was sustained by the goodwill and kindness of the community. But teaching was not his only duty. If a mother fell ill, Ichabod would run to fetch medicine. He would mind a baby when needed, or lend a hand in the fields at harvest time. In return, every household would say with warmth, "Mr. Crane, please stay for supper." And he would, for his appetite was as remarkable as his height. He could devour great stacks of pancakes, thick slices of ham, baked apples, and several cups of milk, all to the amazement of his hosts. At night, Ichabod read. His favorite books were those of ghosts, fairies, and witches. He had a deep fascination for such tales and was, in fact, more knowledgeable about the local legend of the Headless Horseman than anyone else in the valley. Each time he heard a new story, his eyes would light up not with fear, but with a kind of romantic curiosity that thrilled him. Still, when walking alone at night, he was far less brave. As the full moon shone through the branches and the wind rustled softly among the leaves, he would suddenly feel a chill down his spine. I could have sworn something moved behind me, and then, trying to steady his nerves, he would hum a tune, his trembling voice rising into the night as he quickened his pace. By the time he reached home, his fear had already faded, and come morning, he was once again the gentle, smiling teacher beloved by all his pupils. Ichabod was also talented in music. He sang hymns in the church with a clear, high voice that carried farther than anyone else's. On Sunday afternoons, he often gathered the village youth in the square to practice singing and teach them harmony. Sometimes the sound of their voices would echo late into the night, and travelers passing by would whisper, "Surely those must be the songs of spirits." And so, during his stay in the valley, one fateful encounter changed the course of Ichabod Crane's life forever. He met Katrina Van Tassel, the young and beautiful daughter of a wealthy farmer. This young woman would soon become the center of a tale of love, jealousy, and fear, the next chapter in the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Scene 3: Love and Rivalry, Katrina Van Tassel and Brom Bones. Katrina Van Tassel was the only daughter of Baltus Van Tassel, one of the wealthiest farmers in Sleepy Hollow. She was about 18, healthy, bright, and full of youthful charm, with cheeks red as apples and eyes that sparkled with mischief. Her cheerful, soft beauty perfectly suited the image of a prosperous farmer's daughter, and when she smiled, no one could help but feel their heart warm in return. Katrina also had a fondness for city fashions. She loved ribbons, embroidery, and silk scarves. Surrounded by her father's vast farmlands, orchards, and fields of corn, she lived a comfortable and carefree life admired by all the young men in the valley. It was during a music lesson at the Van Tassel farm that Ichabod Crane first met Katrina, and from that day on, he was completely bewitched. Even in class, his mind wandered to her. When he tried to write on the blackboard, he would unconsciously draw the letter K again and again. Before long, Ichabod began visiting the Van Tassel home often. He chose his timing carefully, making sure to arrive when the father was away, and would ride there proudly on his horse, an old, bony plow horse named Gunpowder. Once, that horse must have been strong and tireless in the fields, but now it limped and moved with weary resignation. Still, Ichabod rode it as though he were a noble knight on a grand steed, his back straight and his head high. Katrina welcomed him kindly. She was clever, lively, and just mischievous enough to enjoy teasing those who sought her affection. So when Ichabod began his courtship, she did not yield easily. She toyed with his heart, smiling and turning away. It was a playful game to her, but for Ichabod, it was a sweet and painful trial. Yet Ichabod was not the only man drawn to her. He had a rival, Abraham Van Brunt, better known by his nickname, Brombones. Brom was a broad-shouldered, powerful young man, the best horseman in the whole region. Bold, spirited, and full of good humor, he was also famous for his pranks. His horse, a fierce black stallion named Daredevil, matched his own wild energy, and together the two were known to thunder through the valley like a storm. Brom was infatuated with Katrina. To win her favor, He would show off his strength at village games, crack jokes to make her laugh, or gallop past the Van Tassel farmhouse to catch her attention. Sometimes he even rode circles around Ichabod, taunting him openly with a grin. The rivalry between Ichabod and Brom was silent, but fierce. They never quarreled face to face, but there was always a tense air between them. Brom's friends, taking delight in mischief, often played tricks on Ichabod, loosening his saddle, scratching at his windows at night, or making eerie noises to frighten him. Each time, Ichabod would tremble, clutching his Bible to his chest, convinced the Headless Horseman was near. But even such torments could not break his determination. If he could win Katrina's heart, he told himself, he might one day inherit the Van Tassel estate, its orchards, barns, and golden fields. Each evening at sunset, gazing at the orange sky, Ichabod would dream aloud. If only I could live in that grand Van Tassel mansion, what a splendid life that would be. It was not merely love, it was a dream mingled with ambition. And so, as autumn came, the season of harvest approached, the Van Tassel family prepared a grand harvest feast, inviting everyone from miles round. There, under the glow of lanterns and the music of fiddles, Ichabod Crane, Brom Bones, and Katrina Van Tassel would meet once more, on a night that would change all of their destinies forever. Scene 4, the night of the feast, the beginning of laughter and fear. It was an autumn night when the golden leaves danced upon the wind. At the home of Baltus Van Tassel, the annual harvest festival was in full celebration. The house overflowed with cheerful laughter, and the soft glow of candles spilled from the windows. The aroma of roasted dishes mingled with music and the neighing of horses. Sleepy Hollow's autumn evening was alive with joy and warmth. Villagers arrived in their finest attire. Young men and women filled the dance floor, while the elders gathered by the hearth, sipping wine and sharing old tales. In the bustling kitchen, apple pies, pumpkin tarts, and freshly baked bread rose in fragrant mounds. Mistress Van Tassel greeted each guest with a radiant smile, while servants hurried back and forth with trays of food. Among the guests stood Ichabod Crane. He had polished his worn black suit and slicked his hair with oil, carrying himself with all the pride of a gentleman. As he looked around the grand Van Tassel home, his heart raced with excitement. On the walls hung rifles, hunting horns, and silver candlesticks. On the shelves, gleaming plates and barrels of cider, and in the barns, golden sheaves of grain stacked high to the ceiling. If all this were mine, the thought filled him with a sweet, intoxicating dream. Soon the music began, and the dance floor came alive. To everyone's surprise, Ichabod danced with grace, his tall figure moving lightly across the room. Katrina laughed in his arms, her skirt swirling in rhythm, while the other young men watched with a mix of envy and amusement. In the corner, Brom Bones stood with his arms crossed, frowning at the sight. It wasn't that he disliked dancing, it was that he disliked Ichabod. When the dancing ended, the guests gathered at the long tables to feast. Ichabod's appetite was as legendary as ever. He devoured every dish placed before him, as though there were a bottomless pit inside his stomach. Then, as the night deepened, came the most anticipated part of any Sleepy Hollow gathering, the telling of ghost stories. Men and women crowded around the fire, their faces glowing in the flickering light. One of the older men leaned forward and spoke in a hushed tone. "They say the Headless Horseman has been seen again." A gasp swept through the room. He continued, "A young man passing by the churchyard claimed to see a dark horse in the mist. The rider carried his own head in his arms and lifted it high into the night." Another voice added, "That must be the Hessian ghost, the soldier who lost his head to a cannonball long ago. His spirit still rides, searching for what he has lost." Soon others began to share their own eerie tales, of hearing a horse's neigh at midnight, of seeing glowing eyes in the fog, or the sound of hoof beats echoing across the empty bridge when no one was there. Ichabod listened with shining eyes, leaning forward eagerly like a curious boy. He wasn't frightened, at least not yet. But somewhere deep in his chest, a faint chill began to stir. As the feast drew to an end, the night grew still. The full moon rose high above the trees, stretching their shadows long across the ground. Ichabod exchanged a few words with Katrina, his heart light and full of hope, and then mounted his horse to head home. No one at the Van Tassel estate knew, as they watched him disappear into the moonlit road, that before the night was over, Ichabod Crane's fate would change forever. Scene 5. The Ride Home and the Headless Horseman. The harvest feast had ended, and silence had fallen over Sleepy Hollow. The moon hung high above the treetops, flooding the road with a pale, ghostly light. The wind whispered through the dry leaves, and from far away came the lonely call of a night bird. Ichabod Crane rode slowly home on his weary horse, Gunpowder. The night was clear, yet every shadow seemed to move. His mind was still full of the feast, the laughter, the music, and above all, the image of Katrina. He had spoken to her before leaving, hoping for a smile, perhaps a promise. But whatever words had passed between them, his heart now felt heavy and uncertain. The road wound through the woods, where great oaks and chestnuts arched overhead, their branches forming a dark tunnel. Now and then, the silver light of the moon broke through the leaves, gleaming on the white stones of the path. Ichabod tried to cheer himself by humming a hymn, his trembling voice echoing faintly among the trees. Yet the tales from the evening's ghost stories would not leave his mind. The Headless Horseman, galloping through the night, holding his own head in his hands. Every rustle of the brush, every hoot of an owl made his heart leap. Still, he urged Gunpowder onward, muttering prayers under his breath. As he neared the bridge by the old churchyard, the very place the ghost was said to appear, the horse began to shiver. The air grew colder. Ichabod glanced around, his breath catching in his throat. And then, from the shadow of the trees came the sound of hoof beats. Slow, heavy, drawing nearer. Ichabod froze. He turned his head, and there, upon a great black horse, stood a rider. The figure was cloaked in darkness, tall and silent. No face could be seen, only the outline of a broad chest, and, upon one arm, something round. The rider said nothing. He did not move. He simply sat there, as if watching. Ichabod's voice failed him. He kicked at Gunpowder's sides, and the horse stumbled forward in a panic. The dark rider moved too quietly at first, then faster. Hoof met hoof, echoing through the hollow like thunder. Ichabod dared a glance behind him. The rider was following, and worse, he had no head. Instead, he carried it before him, resting on the saddle like a lantern. Terror seized Ichabod's soul. He raced toward the bridge by the churchyard, because the villagers had said the ghost could not cross it. If he could just reach the other side, he would be safe. "Faster, Gunpowder, faster!" he cried. The horse galloped wildly, sparks flying from its hooves. Behind them came the pounding rhythm of the phantom's pursuit, closer, closer, until the bridge was just ahead. They dashed across it, and Ichabod turned in triumph. But the Headless Horseman rose in his saddle and hurled his head straight at Ichabod. There was a blinding flash, a crushing blow, and then darkness. The next morning, Gunpowder was found wandering near the churchyard, his saddle twisted and broken. Near the bridge lay a shattered pumpkin. Of Ichabod Crane, there was no trace. Some say he was spirited away by the Headless Horseman himself. Others whisper that he fled the valley in shame and never returned. But to this day, on clear autumn nights when the moon is bright, the people of Sleepy Hollow still tell the tale of the schoolmaster who met the ghost of the valley and vanished into legend. The village afterward, and the legend that lives on. Days passed. The story of that strange autumn night spread quickly through Sleepy Hollow. Some whispered that Ichabod Crane had been carried away by the Headless Horseman himself. Others claimed he had fled in terror, ashamed of his defeat and heartbreak. When the villagers found Gunpowder wandering near the churchyard, his saddle twisted and torn, and a shattered pumpkin lying beside the bridge, they could only shake their heads and cross themselves in silence. No one ever saw Ichabod again. Not long after, Brom Bones was seen laughing more than ever. especially whenever someone mentioned the schoolmaster's disappearance. Whenever the tale of the ghostly chase was brought up, Brom would smile just slightly and change the subject. And soon after, he married Katrina Van Tassel. Years went by, children grew up, and old men grew older. But on quiet autumn nights, when the moon rises over the valley, the people of Sleepy Hollow still gather by their firesides to tell the tale of the wandering teacher from Connecticut, of the harvest feast, and of that dreadful midnight ride beneath the haunted trees. They speak of the Headless Horseman, how his black steed still races through the valley at night, and how the echo of his hooves can still be heard beyond the bridge by the old churchyard. And so, the legend of Sleepy Hollow endures, woven into the mist, the moonlight, and the hearts of those who live in that silent valley. Whenever the wind rustles through the trees, or a lonely rider passes beneath the stars, someone will always whisper, "Perhaps that was the Headless Horseman, riding once again." Thank you for listening until the end. How did you enjoy this autumn night's tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow? Like the quiet legend of this peaceful valley, may the story gently remain somewhere in your heart.